The Blue Ridge police station squatted on the edge of town, like a tired old hound, peeling paint on the walls, a flickering neon sign buzzing over the entrance, and the faint tang of burnt coffee drifting through the air. It was a crisp Wednesday morning when Richard Nelson stepped through the double doors, his boots scuffing the chipped linoleum floor.
Welcome to Shadow Crime. Before we begin, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue creating even better content. Thank you so much. All right, let's get started.
At 45, he was a broad-shouldered man with close-cropped graying hair and skin the color of rich oak. But today, no badge gleamed on his chest. He wore a faded denim jacket, jeans worn soft at the knees, and a trucker cap pulled low. No hint of the crisp sheriff's uniform waiting in his truck. Richard wasn't here to announce himself as the new sheriff. He was here to see the truth. The department had a reputation. Whispers of brutality, complaints of bias stacking up like unpaid bills. As the first black sheriff in Blue Ridge's history, Richard knew the stakes. He'd spent 20 years climbing the ranks elsewhere, busting his ass through late-night patrols and courtroom battles, only to land in a precinct where the air felt thick with secrets. The mayor had begged him to clean it up, but Richard wasn't naive. You don't fix rot with speeches, you dig it out. So here he was, undercover on day one, just another guy off the street, eyes sharp and ears open. He didn't have to wait long. At the front desk, Officer Pete Grayson, a stocky redhead with a buzz cut and a permanent smirk, barely glanced up from his crossword. "What you want?" he grunted, pen tapping. Richard kept his voice low, steady. "Need to report a stolen wallet," Grayson snorted, leaning back. "Yeah? Check your pockets again, pal. Folks like you lose stuff all the time." The jab hung there, casual but pointed, and Richard's jaw tightened. He let it slide, watching as Grayson tossed a form at him like it was trash, muttering, "Fill it out over there if you can read." Across the room, two cops, Daniels and Ruiz, lounged by the coffee machine, their laughter cutting through the hum. Daniels, a wiry guy with a faded tattoo peeking from his sleeve, nodded toward Richard. "Lost tourist, huh? Bet he's got a sob story." Ruiz chuckled, sipping from a cracked mug. "Better frisk him. Looks shifty." No one knew the shifty guy was their new boss, and Richard didn't flinch, just scribbled on the form, cataloging every word, every glance. This wasn't just a test, it was evidence. He'd come to Blue Ridge to lead, but first, he'd learn. The rot was already showing. Now he'd root it out, badge or no badge. A sheriff goes undercover. What's he about to uncover? Hit that like this station's hiding more than coffee stains. The Blue Ridge police station's break room smelled like stale donuts and motor oil, a grimy hub where the hum of a busted vending machine mixed with low chuckles. Richard Nelson leaned against a scuffed wall, his denim jacket blending him into the shadows, trucker cap still low over his brow. He'd lingered after filing his fake wallet report, nursing a lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup, eyes tracking the room. The precinct's pulse was lazy but jagged. Cops sprawled in mismatched chairs, tossing jabs like it was a sport. Then Officer Daniels sauntered in, and the air shifted. Daniels was a lean, wiry guy, mid-30s, pale skin flushed from too much sun, a patchy beard framing a smirk that never quit. His uniform hung loose, badge crooked, a faded Semper Fi tattoo peeking from his rolled-up sleeve. He clocked Richard instantly, eyes narrowing like he'd spotted prey. "Well, look at this," Daniels drawled, loud enough to turn heads. "We got a bum stinking up the place." The room perked up. Ruiz, a stocky cop with a buzz cut, grinned from the couch. Grayson, still at the desk, barked a laugh. Richard didn't move, just sipped his coffee, letting the words sink in. Daniels stepped closer, boots thudding on the linoleum, his shadow falling over Richard. "What's your deal, huh? Crawl out of some ditch?" He didn't wait for an answer, hocked a wad of spit and let it fly. It hit Richard square on the cheek, wet and warm, dripping down his jaw. The room erupted. Ruiz slapped his knee. Grayson whooped, "Nice shot!" And a rookie in the corner snickered behind his hand. Richard's hand twitched, instinct screaming to wipe it off, to swing, but he didn't. He stood there, face still, spit glistening under the flickering light, eyes locked on Daniels. Inside, his pulse roared. Outside, he was stone. "Oh, he's too dumb to talk," Daniels jeered, circling now, chest puffed. "Bet he's here to beg for change. Go on, dance for it, boy." The boy landed hard, sharp as a blade, and the laughter swelled, cruel, careless, a pack feeding off the jab. Richard's jaw clenched, coffee cup creaking in his grip, but he kept silent. This wasn't about pride, it was about proof. Every slur, every cackle was a nail in their coffin. He'd come to see the rot, and here it was, spitting in his face, literally. Daniels smirked, turning to his audience. "See, told you, trash don't fight back." He swaggered off, high-fiving Ruiz, oblivious that the trash was their new sheriff, cataloguing every second. Richard wiped the spit with his sleeve, slow, deliberate, then pulled his cap lower. He'd let them dig their hole. Deeper they went, the harder they'd fall. A cop spits on his boss. Does he know who he's messing with? Smash that subscribe. This precinct's about to burn. The Blue Ridge Police Station's briefing room was a cramped, sweaty box. Rows of folding chairs creaking under the weight of 24 cops. A chipped wooden podium up front, and a flickering projector casting a dim blue glow. It was Friday. Morning, the air thick with the buzz of a mandatory all-staff meeting. Officers slouched, whispering jabs about the new guy they hadn't met. Some hotshot sheriff from out of town. Daniels leaned back in the third row, arms crossed, his wiry frame radiating smugness, still riding high from his breakroom stunt. Ruiz smirked beside him, cracking his knuckles, while Grayson doodled on a notepad, oblivious. Then the door swung open, and Richard Nelson walked in. He looked the same as Wednesday, faded denim jacket, jeans, trucker cap shadowing his face, but his stride was different, deliberate, heavy, like a storm rolling in. No one clocked it at first. Daniels nudged Ruiz, muttering, "What's the bum doing here?" A few snickers rippled, until Richard stepped to the podium, pulled off his cap, and let his graying hair catch the light. He adjusted the mic, low screech cutting the chatter dead. "Morning," he said, voice deep, steady, slicing through the room like a blade. "I'm Richard Nelson, your new sheriff." The silence hit like a brick. Daniels's smirk froze, then melted. His face flushed crimson, eyes bugging out as if he'd been punched. Ruiz's jaw dropped, his knuckles mid-crack. Grayson's pen clattered to the floor, rolling under his chair. Every cop who'd laughed, jeered, or egged Daniels on 2 days ago sat rigid, spines stiffening as realization sank in. The bum they'd mocked, the man Daniels had spat on, was their boss. Richard let it hang, his dark eyes scanning. The room, locking on each guilty face for a beat too long. The spit stain might have been gone, but they all felt it now. "I've been here all week," he continued, hands gripping the podium, knuckles scarred from years on the beat. "Not in a suit, not with a badge, just watching. And what I saw..." He paused, letting the weight settle. A culture so toxic, it'd choke a landfill. Officers abusing power, disrespecting citizens, hell, disrespecting me because you thought no one was looking. Daniel shrank in his seat, sweat beading on his brow, as Richard's gaze drilled into him. "You spit on your sheriff, Daniels. You laughed, Ruiz. Grayson, you cheered, and none of you stopped it." The room was a graveyard, no coughs, no shuffles, just the hum of the projector. Richard straightened, voice rising. "That ends today. This precinct isn't your playground. It's a shield for Blue Ridge. From now on, respect isn't optional. Accountability isn't a suggestion. You're here to serve, not swagger. Cross that line and you're out." He tapped the podium once, hard, the sound echoing. "I'm not asking for change. I'm demanding it. Daniels stared at his boots, face a mask of shame. The others avoided Richard's eyes, stunned into submission. He stepped back, cap in hand, leaving them to stew. The rot had a name now, and a target on its back. A sheriff flips the script. Will his crew clean up or crack? Hit that like. This reckoning's just begun. The Blue Ridge police station buzzed with a nervous edge Monday morning, the kind of quiet that follows a thunderclap. Richard Nelson's bombshell reveal still echoed, his denim-clad silhouette now a shadow over every desk. The briefing room. Showdown had stripped the precinct bare, and no one felt it harder than Officer Daniels. By 9 a.m., he stood in Richard's office, a cramped space with a dented metal desk, a single window streaked with grime, and a corkboard pinned with faded maps. Richard, now in his sheriff's uniform, crisp khaki, badge gleaming, didn't sit. He stood, arms crossed, eyes like steel traps. "You're done, Daniels," he said, voice flat. "Suspended. Effective now. Pack your locker." Daniel's wiry frame slumped, his patchy beard twitching as his mouth opened, then shut. The red flush from Friday's shame was back, but fainter, defeat replacing defiance. "You can't," he started, but Richard cut him off, tossing a file onto the desk. It landed with a thud, pages of complaints, blurred body cam stills, witness names scribbled in ink. "I can, and I'm digging deeper. Every stop, every slur, you're answering for it." Daniels grabbed his cap, hands shaking, and stormed out, the door slamming as whispers flared in the hall. Grayson and Ruiz, hovering near the coffee pot, froze mid-sip. Richard's footsteps behind Daniels were a warning bell. The precinct rattled. Lockers clanged as Daniels emptied his, muttering curses under his breath, his exit a slow march past staring eyes. The old guard, cops who'd thrived on backslaps and blind eyes, shifted uneasily at their desks, papers rustling, voices low. "He's serious," Grayson hissed to Ruiz, who just nodded, spilling coffee on his sleeve. The era of cover-ups was crumbling, and they knew it. Richard didn't stop at Daniels. He posted a memo on the breakroom board, black ink stark. Full review of conduct records, no exceptions. Phones buzzed with rumors, IA sniffing around, files being pulled. The air tasted of panic, but cracks of light broke through. Officer Reyes, a lanky 26-year-old with dark hair and a rookie's. Earnestness lingered after shift. He knocked on Richard's door, uniform pressed, eyes nervous but clear. "Sheriff, I want this place to be better," he said, voice steadying. "I've seen the crap. Daniels, the others. I'm in if you're fixing it." Richard studied him, then nodded, a faint smile tugging his lip. "Good. Start by listening, really listening to the folks out there." Reyes left, shoulders squared, and soon a few others, young cops tired of the old ways, followed. They swapped smirks for questions, lingered at community calls, scribbled notes instead of tickets. Richard stood at his window, watching Daniels peel out of the lot in a rusty pickup, dust kicking up. One down, but the system, still a beast. He turned to his desk, a stack of personnel files waiting, years of rot to unravel. "This isn't a quick fix," he muttered, pen in hand. "It's a rebuild." Outside, Reyes waved off a kid on a bike. No hassle, just a nod. Change was creeping in, slow but real. A bully cop's out, but can the sheriff remake the rest? Smash that subscribe? This fight's getting raw. 6 months had passed since Richard Nelson ripped the mask off Blue Ridge's rot, and the precinct felt like a different beast. The old break room, once a den of sneers and stale coffee, now hummed with a cautious new rhythm. The chipped vending, machines still whirred, but the air carried less venom. Richard stood at the precinct's front steps, his sheriff's uniform creased from a long day, badge catching the late afternoon sun. Behind him, the station's faded sign had a fresh coat of paint, small but symbolic. He'd promised change, and damn if he wasn't delivering. The purge came swift. After Daniels' suspension, Richard's deep dive into the files unearthed a cesspool, Cops with rap sheets longer than their service records, buried under years of winks and shrugs. Grayson was next, caught on a citizen's dashcam roughing. Up a teen for a busted taillight. Ruiz followed, his lost body cam footage mysteriously resurfacing with slurs intact. By month's end, 5 badges hit the shredder. Fired, no appeal. The old guard howled, but Richard didn't blink. "Shape up or ship out," he'd said at a tense roll call, voice like gravel. The room shrank under his stare, and the holdouts packed up, tails tucked. In their place, fresh blood flowed. Richard handpicked recruits. Officer Reyes leading the charge, now mentoring a batch of rookies with sharp eyes and sharper ethics. They weren't perfect, mistakes happened, but they listened. A new hire, Jenkins, a wiry black woman with a quick laugh, started a coffee chat with local kids, badges off, just talking. Reyes pushed a Walk With Us program, cops strolling. Main Street, not prowling, handing out cards instead of cuffs. Complaints dropped 30%, stats Richard pinned to his office wall beside a photo of his first day, cap low and spit still fresh in memory. The community noticed. At the Blue Ridge Diner, old-timers like Miss Clara, 70 with a cane and a sharper tongue, started nodding at patrols instead of glaring. "Didn't think I'd see it," she told Reyes over pie, her wrinkled hands steadying a mug. "Y'all ain't saints, but you're trying." A mural went up on Oak Street, kids painting a cop and a girl high-fiving, colors bright against cracked brick. Calls to the station shifted. Fewer screams, more, "Can you check my porch?" Trust wasn't solid yet, but it was thawing, one handshake at a time. Richard leaned on his desk that night, a cracked mug of coffee cooling beside a stack of reform proposals, body cam mandates, bias training, citizen boards. He rubbed his temples, the weight of it all pressing down. Change wasn't a switch flip. Daniel's firing didn't erase decades of scars. He'd caught flack, letters calling him a traitor, a brick through his truck window. But the mural, Clara's nod, kept him going. "Every step counts," he muttered, scribbling a note for tomorrow's council pitch. The system wasn't fixed. Rot lingered in corners, but it was bending. He'd fight from the inside, inch by inch, till it broke right. Outside, Reyes waved off a kid on a bike, same one from months back, now grinning, no fear. Richard watched, a tired smile tugging his lips. Blue Ridge was breathing again. A sheriff's war heals a town, but is it enough? Hit that subscribe. This badge is still battling. The story of Richard Nelson, the undercover sheriff who transformed Blue Ridge, carries lessons that resonate powerfully for those in life's later years. At its heart, it teaches that courage doesn't retire, it ripens with age. Richard, a seasoned man with grey in his hair and scars on his hands, didn't just accept the rot he found. He faced it head-on, risking scorn to demand better. For the elderly, this is a quiet call. Your years don't diminish your voice. You've seen enough, good and bad, to know what's right, and even in twilight you can stand firm. Maybe it's not a precinct you're fixing, but a family spat, a neighborhood wrong, or a community slipping off track. Your steady presence, honed by time, can still shift the tide. Another truth shines through. Change starts small, but it's never too late to plant the seed. Richard didn't overhaul Blue Ridge overnight. He took it one spit-stained moment, one fired bully, one honest rookie at a time. For older folks, this mirrors the slow, patient work of a life well lived. You might not see the full bloom, Richard didn't either, but every step matters. That chat with a grandkid about fairness, that vote you cast, that story you share, about harder days? They're bricks in a wall you're building for those who follow. Age gives you perspective. Use it to nudge the world, even if it's just your corner. Finally, the story whispers about trust, how it's broken by arrogance and mended by humility. Richard faced a precinct that sneered at him, a community that doubted. Yet he earned their faith not with flash, but with grit. For the elderly, this is a reminder. Your legacy isn't in what you demand, but what you prove. You've weathered enough storms to know pride topples faster than kindness stands. Maybe it's listening when you'd rather lecture, or admitting a fault to mend. A rift, small acts that rebuild. What time phrase? Richard's triumph wasn't in badges pinned, but in eyes that stopped glaring and started nodding. This tale offers one more gift for the silver-haired. Purpose doesn't fade, it adapts. Richard could have coasted, taken the title and the paycheck, but he dug in because he'd seen too much to sit still. You too carry a lifetime, joys, losses, lessons, and it's never too late to wield it. Volunteer at that shelter, call out that wrong, teach that skill. Age isn't a curtain falling, it's a stage reset. Richard rebuilt a station. You can rebuild a bond, a hope, a piece of your world. The elderly aren't relics, your roots, and with every quiet stand, you prove the ground still shifts beneath you. This speaks to resilience, patience, and purpose, values that hit home for older viewers, with fresh encouragement to act in their own lives, ready to tweak or move on.